everything that we see on the board that is right behind us that has, been lit with numbers throughout the course of the day. And of course, we're joined by the SABC News specialist researcher, Amil Umraw, right now on the program. It's great to have you again. We've been trying to make sense of all the numbers that we've been seeing throughout the day. And there's been talks about coalitions, especially from the desk. That's a catchphrase that's been so popular over the past, couple of hours, Amil. So I just want us to talk about, what we see on the board right now. Clearly the ANC leads, but is barely hanging on in what has been termed one bruising election contest. Talk to us about the numbers.
I don't think the ANC expected anywhere near what they've turned out to have got. And even though we're only 58% in with audited votes, what we're seeing from the projections from the CSIR is that what we're seeing on the board now might be the eventual outcome of these elections. So as we do see it from now, the ANC sitting at obviously ahead with about 46.42% of all votes so far. They've got control over 52 councils at the moment, followed secondly by the DA, who've got 22.25% of total votes. And obviously, that's quite reminiscent of what's been happening with them in 2016. So not much change for the DA. And the same can be said for the EFF, with about 10% of all votes at the moment.
Actually, I just wanted us to get into that. Do you think the EFF is in a way making inroads at the expense of the ANC by the looks of things?
It's difficult to tell, Olisi, because what we see from the EFF is that even though they've garnered more than 1 million votes in total, they haven't been able to even secure one council yet. So it shows that their votes, while they are immense, is not really making an impact in municipalities the way that they would have wanted it to be. So yes, they are taking away votes from the ANC, but I think that smaller parties like Action SA, we see the NFP, we see, well, we can't really call the IFP a small party, but the Independent Civic Organization of South Africa, I think there's parties like that that are taking that vote away from the ANC and independents, of course, rather than the EFF.
Yeah, and New Kids on the Block, Action SA, getting about 6% across the board, just taking a bit from the ANC and the DA at the same time.
Well, Action SA is proving very strong in big cities. For example, like in Johannesburg, Ekurhuleni Tshwane, their votes is almost as strong as the EFF. So they might be the next big king player in our metros, especially in Gauteng. And we'll see how good they sort of wager in that battle between the ANC and the DA going forward.
Yeah. Fascinating enough, the talk about coalitions is quite popular at this point in time. And I know one analyst described it as some sort of a forced marriage. And we've heard so many political parties coming out to say they'll be pairing up with so-and-so and they would not be pairing up with so-and-so. But what's the reality behind coalitions and how sustainable are they?
Listen, with the way voting patterns are going, coalitions are indeed the future. However, we've seen from 2016 that they don't always work. If you look at our big metros, the DA went into a number of coalitions or just partnership agreements with the likes of the EFF, and those all mostly fell apart heading into 2021. I think the most easiest way I can describe that is if we're going ahead with the coalition governments, we need to almost find these coalitions, maybe get those agreements done like a business partnership almost, where a formal agreement is made between the parties and they're held to a contract almost. And there's obviously an ombudsman or some sort of regulatory body that keeps them bound to that contract and their contract to the public as they go forward in those coalitions. So they don't just fall apart because a leader said something somewhere else, as we've seen between the EFF and the DA, where the national politics and the national leaders say one thing and it breaks down the coalitions in the local municipalities. We can't have that as we go forward. It's unsustainable.
Absolutely, we can't have that because at the end of the day, it's the people that suffer because essentially local government is as the foundation phase and it's the people that end up suffering.
Yeah, of course. Local government is your sort of holder of all your basic service delivery, or most of it. And this is why we see the turnout that we did in this election. People obviously not happy with the way that municipalities have treated them over the last 5 years or before that, making promises that they just can't keep. So when it comes to coalition government, then it makes it even more complicated because you might not necessarily have the candidate or the mayor that you expected when you cast your vote. But it all just depends on that partnership and how it works. So that situation does become a bit more complicated, and we'll just have to see how those play out once these coalitions come through. Interestingly, there are already 35 hung municipalities been recorded. It's now just past 2 o'clock. What we can confirm is that Nelson Mandela Bay is a hung council once again since 2016.
It's fascinating stuff, and I know that you're co-rating all those hung municipalities for us, and we will, of course, I think, be having this conversation about those hung municipalities at a later stage on the program today. But back to that board, Amil, we're seeing 58% of audited votes that are done and dusted at this particular point in time. What are we likely to see as the day progresses? I know we spoke about projections.
Yeah. Well, listen, 58% of votes have been audited, but the last time we spoke to the ISC, about 80% were counted in total. So we're getting closer to that 100% mark. And if we compare what's on the board to what the CSIR has projected, I think that we're not going to see very many changes to what we currently see now on the board.
Fascinating stuff. And of course, I can see there the Good Party, which has been one of the newsmakers throughout the week, sitting at about 82%, eh?
No, that's 0.82 if I can see. Yeah, so listen, they are gaining, they're gaining a lot of traction, especially in Cape Town, Johannesburg, and Durban. So they are gaining some traction, but unfortunately, if we look at it, they haven't been able to secure a council, but they do have a few seats, if I'm not mistaken, about 26 seats in total, which is not bad for a party who's just started off. Not the largest of party at all, but obviously you are gaining on the reputation of people like Patricia de Lille and their past government experience. So I think that's shining through for them and what they're promising to their voting polls. Yeah.
Amil Umraw is our specialist researcher here at the SABC. Thank you so much. And of course, we'll be touching base with you a bit later on the show. And of course, Flo is on standby with your latest in Interaction. Flo, take it away.
Right, thanks very much to you, Mkoli. So it's obviously very important for us to take a look at what people are saying, the comments, and no easier place to take a look at in terms of seeing people's sentiment.